This episode is brought to you by Ursa Minor Outfitters. Folks, I'm absolutely in love with my loon mug. It's handmade, it's an absolute piece of art. Whether it's at the office or at the house, people keep asking to check it out. If you're not a loon fan, they also have other beautiful mugs for wildlife fans of moose, bears, and eagles. They specialize in products highlighting the outdoors and local pride through quality design by local artists. They've even started expanding into items beyond mugs, like apparel, dog accessories, and soon candles and more. They also try to partner and highlight other small businesses, and in some cases, forego profits in lieu of charitable giving to help their community, such as the dog rescue. So check them out, UrsaMinorOutfitters.com, and enter promo code HikesMikes10 at checkout to receive 10% off your order. And for our four-legged hiking partners, they also have a portable silicone dog bowl and also a sweet over-the-collar dog bandana. Go check them out, UrsaMinorOutfitters.com, and don't forget to enter promo code HikesMikes10 at checkout to receive 10% off your order. Welcome, everyone, to the latest episode of the Hikes and Mikes podcast. I'm your host, Ivan, and I'm excited to share this new season of the podcast with you. With both fall and winter arriving in the Pacific Northwest, it's time to store the mobile recording studio. This season, we'll be switching things up and interviewing some of my favorite hikers that I follow on Instagram virtually. We're following a similar format to season 1, where the first part of the episode focuses on the guest and their hiking adventures, and we're still going to end each episode with a speed round of this or that questions, all related to hiking. Today's episode features the founder of Vaucluse Gear and creator of the cool dry airflow frame, Brice. You can follow him on Instagram at Vaucluse Gear. We'll be asking Brice about his reintroduction into hiking, his hiking adventures in the French Alps, and learn about how the cool dry airflow frame came to be. Without further ado, let's jump into our episode with Brice. Welcome, everyone, to a new episode of the Hikes and Mikes podcast. I'm here with founder and creator of Vaucluse Gear with Brice. Thank you for coming on to the podcast. Really excited to talk to you about your recent reintroduction into hiking and also the cool dry frame that you invented for hikers to use, not just in summer months, but hopefully also in winter months. Could you share a little bit about yourself?
Sure, Ivan. First, thank you so much for having me on the podcast. Great to be here. You could consider myself not an expert hiker, and that's pretty much kind of the reason why I created this cool dry frame, because I'm one of the, which I thought was few, but I was one of the people who just sweats a whole lot with backpacking, and I really didn't like backpacking for that reason. And then one day I thought, well, I really like to be outside and in the outdoors, so I've pretty much out of necessity, I had to figure out a solution for myself, which I did. And surprise, surprise, more people than I thought also had the problem that I have, is they love to be outside. However, they sweat a whole lot and they would like to find a way to sweat less and have a more consistent and moderate body core temperature.
And that's definitely been a problem for me, is the gear. Some of the backpacks, once you get that smell of sweat in there, it's hard to get out. And I've tried different life hacks and things you can do, and you can't really put it in the washer. So I'm really excited to talk about the cool dry frame with you and hear a little bit about how the development came and how it's used. But we kind of talked about it a little before we started recording, but there's been a little bit of a reintroduction into hiking for you over the last year. You kind of did a pause on it and kind of reintroduced yourself over the last 12 months to it. Can you share a little bit about this last year in regards to hiking and how you originally got started back in your youth?
Absolutely. So in my teens, I hiked a lot. So I would travel to Europe, and I hiked the Camino for about 4 weeks, and then I also hiked the northern part of Italy for about 3 or 4 weeks. And between that, I've done other hikes as well in my teens. However, they were such big hikes that the one thing that turned me off from hiking is that I would have this huge, I think it was like a 55-liter or 65-liter backpack on me the entire time. And this was in the summers of Europe, and like Spain and Italy can get quite hot. And I just sweated a whole lot. I loved being outside, but I said, man, if I got to deal with this sweat, I don't think maybe this isn't for me. So I pretty much much was done with the outdoors after hiking those few years. And then later on in my life, it wasn't necessarily hiking that turned me off of backpacking, but it was work. I commuted a lot with my work. Like I would bike to work or I would take public transportation, and the easiest way of carrying my laptop and everything else was with a backpack. And so I usually would have to wear a suit, and I once again I would sweat, and I would probably have to have like a coat on top of my suit, and it was just really uncomfortable. And once again I said, you know what, this backpacking thing really isn't for me. However, a few years ago I got married, and my mother-in-law was loves to hike and loves to backpack, and so obviously, you know, as the good son-in-law that I am, I would go out with her. However, what I would do, unfortunately, I'm kind of ashamed to say it, is that I would have her just carry all my stuff. I didn't want to wear the backpack. I just would rather enjoy the time being outdoors with, my family than have to deal with the sweat. And then eventually I thought, well, quote unquote, there's got to be a better way. And like, I don't really like having my mother-in-law carry my stuff. So I eventually made something that would help me carry my own stuff and enjoy being outside. And so that's kind of where I am today over the past year, is that I'm finding this new love of being outside, because I don't really have to worry about having a lot of back sweat. And maybe there's your audience, there's like three different types of people I found with sweat. There's the type of people like me and you who are like, I could really do without this sweat problem. And then there's the second type of people who don't really have the problem. And then the third type of people are pretty much saying, yeah, but just get over it. It's part of the experience. And so I understand all three aspects. It's just personally for me, I'd rather somehow moderate my sweat, because the core temperature and everything, I'm very sensitive, and I'm not ashamed to say it, but it's where I am today, and I'm back out in the outdoors, and I love it.
Now, you actually, your home base is in a state that's known for its really grueling summers, and that's Arizona. But, most people think of Arizona as the desert, but there's some really diverse hiking throughout the state. What would you say is your favorite region right now to explore in Arizona?
I would say that I have two favorite regions, and that's the Coconino Forest, which is pretty much where Sedona is, and the McDowell-Sonoran Preserve, which is where you could say Scottsdale, Northeast Phoenix is. And the Sonoran Preserve is amazing because they describe it as I believe it's called an urban park or an urban preserve, because it's technically part of the city, and it's 30,000 acres, and you literally can just, you can quote unquote have a cup at Starbucks, and the next thing you know, you can walk, an 8-mile hike if you want, and then come back. It's really right there with the city. You don't have to drive pretty much to a trail. And then the Coconino Forest, which is just beautiful because of Sedona and obviously the red rocks, but there's just so much to see. So I would say those are my two favorite places to go. And the temperatures vary in Arizona. So obviously in the summers it can get quite hot, but in the mornings it's quite cool. It's in the 50s, it's in the 60s. So you have to be prepared both for kind of the cool and the extreme heat.
And we kind of talked about this before we started the podcast, but I lived in Tempe, there right outside of Phoenix, for about 1.5 years during the pandemic. And one of the hardest things for me was being able to hike during the summer months, because I was working a full-time job. So, I would either have to wake up early in the morning or wait until it was nighttime. But for any listeners that are visiting Phoenix that do want to explore and hike in the summer months, what kind of tips and tricks do you have that would keep them safe on the trails during those grueling 100+ degree days?
I would simply say you have to get out early. I would say that's the only time to go hiking. Maybe it's like at between 5 a.m. and 8 a.m. I would avoid hiking altogether in the afternoon, because it's still going to be pretty hot. You can't underestimate the heat. I'm originally from Texas, so when you step out, you have the humidity, which reminds you, because you sweat instantly and you're like, wow, this is hot. But when you're in Phoenix, it's hot, but you're not technically sweating. So usually, and this is the way my mind works, usually I think, well, if I'm not sweating, it's not, the heat isn't that bad. It's like my body seems to be taking care of itself. However, that is just not the case. You can't overlook the heat. There are tons of signs everywhere on the trails about heat exhaustion. Take a ton of water, take a hat, be careful, don't take your dog out. It's because unfortunately there are stories of people either having heat exhaustion and having to be, helicoptered out, or and hopefully they survive, but it's a serious thing. So if you come out, there's a lot of great hiking, but do not underestimate the heat. And if you're not used to it, try a 30-minute hike and just test out the waters, but don't don't think, well, I would assume most hikers are like this. They understand their limits, but sometimes, you just have to, just be very, very cautious.
And realize that your water supply is going to be going through quite quickly. So if you start running out, it's best to turn around and not push it.
Exactly. There's no shame in turning around. And that's something that I've learned. I've only been hiking again for the past year. And my first few hikes, I really pushed it. And I thought, like, I can really, I can really do this. And one of my hikes was, I think it turned out to be a 7-hour hike up in the French Alps. I was estimating like a 3 to 4 hour hike. I stayed on the mountain for 7 hours because I got lost. And it was a little scary, but I learned quickly. I was like, there's no shame in turning back or saying, you know what? Maybe I wasn't as prepared. So I will be the first to raise my hand and say, you know what, I really need to learn my limits, and I need to test out an area before I try and push myself a little bit more than what I thought I was capable of doing.
Great tip is to test it out before you commit to a big grueling hike. And, that's a great thing that you brought up about the French Alps, because we did do a little deep dive into your Instagram and saw that you did some amazing hiking there in France. Can you share with the audience a little bit about your experiences hiking in France and in the French Alps?
Absolutely. Hiking in the Alps is unbelievable. One of the big things that I really enjoyed is people actually live on the mountains. You've got people who just have homes there, but you also have farmers, and you have people who, what's very popular in France is the different types of cheeses. And so you have goats, you have cows, and then obviously you have other types of animals, you have pigs. So you're walking the trails, and all of a sudden you hear the bells around their necks, or you encounter some sheepdogs, and these sheepdogs are work dogs, and they're not usually the type of dogs where they come up to you and say, oh, hello, fellow human, please be nice to me. It's like, no, they're doing a job, and so they smell you, and then they start barking at you, and then they don't stop barking at you until you're really far away from the herd. But other than that, it's absolutely beautiful, because obviously the Alps are massive, and that was the first time I believe that I've hiked the Alps. I've gone skiing in the Alps, which is impressive, but just the diversity of obviously the views and the different types of encounters with different animals. Obviously, there are probably other parts of the Alps where it's much more remote. But where I was, I'd never experienced that. Coming across some pigs were blocking the trail, and you kind of had to just push yourself around them.
Yeah. So what area of France were you in?
It was just south of Geneva, which is a border town between Switzerland and France, and then just north of a town called Annecy. I believe it's spelled Annecy, and it was right in between those two. And there's some beautiful lakes. There's some glacier lakes at the bottom, so you can go. In the summertime, you can go swimming. It's very lively in the summertime, but and you have some big cities, and then some massive mountains.
Nice. Are the trails there pretty well maintained, like you've seen over in the States?
They are very well maintained. The French are very passionate about their outdoors and their hiking. So definitely there are signposts everywhere and obviously the kilometers of how far to go. It's very, very well organized. I was really, really impressed. And obviously, I was using AllTrails, and so AllTrails has all of the trails listed on as well. So definitely to go back on what we talked about maybe in Phoenix and about the heat is, when you're out there in the Alps, you really have to know where you're going. And I had thought that I knew where I was going, but I learned the unfortunate reality that just because something says it's a trail on AllTrails doesn't mean it's an actual trail on the mountain. So I learned that, I thought, AllTrails just has, actual trails, but sometimes it has trails where people hiked or, and they said there's a trail, and then maybe that trail over a year or two isn't really there anymore. So that was the main reason why I got lost, is AllTrails said there was a trail, but then on the mountain, it really wasn't a trail. So cross-reference, do your preparation, and obviously I would assume most of the people listening to this are saying, yeah, Brice, of course. That's backpacking 101. So I'm unfortunately learning some of the realities as I go along.
Oh no, Breeze. I think a lot of people have fallen into the AllTrails leading them a little bit of astray. The one trick I've used is I'll download multiple maps because on AllTrails you can download their AllTrail versions, but you can also get like satellite, and I think there's like USGA. Because I've been there too, where AllTrails is telling me to go one way, but what I'm seeing on the trail is completely different.
That's a very good point. I'm going to download multiple. I would just download the AllTrails version, but now that you tell me, I'm definitely going to do that.
Yeah, it's really helped me out where even if I couldn't see the trail, if it wasn't well defined, I could see where I was at and where I needed to go and kind of bushwhack myself to the summit or to my destination, or be able to find the trail where it's a little bit more clearly defined. It's definitely something that it's always in the back of my mind because here in Washington State, where I'm based out of, I use AllTrails, and then we also have the Washington Trails Association, and cross-referencing between those two have been really helpful. Now, you kind of mentioned it. Have you had any other close calls when you've gone hiking? You explained to us about getting lost, but has there been any wildlife encounters, or maybe Mother Nature didn't play nice while you were out, or had any run-ins with either some weird or creepy people?
The other thing that I've learned quickly is how much elevation gain that I can pretty much handle myself. And I would consider myself quite a healthy, I guess mid-aged male now, I would have to describe myself. And I work out, at least 2 to 3 times a week. However, I've learned that at least in the Arizona, I would say my maximum elevation that I can handle, like going up it can get quite exhausting. And I've learned that, 1,000 feet elevation gain, whether it's a 1 hour hike or a 3 or a 4 hour hike, usually for me, that's a good indicator. And when I was in the Alps, I believe I would say maybe it was 2,800. I don't think it was, or was it 2,000? I'll try and look it up as we speak. But I learned quickly that I need to be conscious not only of like time and my trail, but also I've got to be conscious of what will the overall elevation gain be of my hike. But I learned that you really, once you're tired on a trail, sure you can, take your backpack off and have lunch or something. But even that, your legs can get quite exhausted. So another lesson learned is, be conscious of your total elevation gain before you're going to go out there, and just be prepared. The last thing that you want is to like take a break because you're exhausted. I guess my North Star is, you take a break because it's midway through and you just want to, you're stopping for the sake of stopping and maybe enjoying, the view and where you are, and want to talk to people, etc., and have a water break. But you don't stop because you're saying, I'm exhausted, I need to take a break, and then I'll continue. I don't think that's a recipe for success out in the out in the great outdoors.
Oh, definitely. I think where a lot of issues happen, and it's not just when you're exhausted, but making it to a summit is only halfway of the hike. And I don't know if it's true or not, but I felt like I've heard in the past where, a lot of the emergencies that happened is descending from your summit. If you're exhausted from climbing and maybe the trail isn't as well maintained, your footing's not the greatest and your feet are giving out, it could spell a recipe for an emergency.
That's interesting. I can see that. That's a good point. And usually when you're going down, and if you had already been tired, you're probably going maybe faster than you want, and your mentality might be, I just want to get off this mountain, which was the case for me. I just want to get the heck out of there. And thankfully, I got off the mountain, but I had to stop probably every, in the end, I'm looking at my stats. I was out there. My elapsed time was almost 7 hours, but my moving time was 5 hours. So that means I 2 hours of my hike, which is almost, what is that? It's going to be 30% of my hike was not moving, which shows that, I was exhausted, and it was very exhausting. So thankfully I got out of there alive. But sometimes I thought, man, I was with my wife. I'm like, maybe I didn't say it, but I was like, I hope I don't have to just sit here and say, go get help, because my legs were done.
Oh, that's a long day to be out on the trails. It's 8 hours it's almost a full day. Now, when you do have a successful hike, I do feel like most hikers have an I made it ritual, either on the trail or after their hike is done. Maybe it's a favorite snack, a meal, possibly some trail brews. What would you say is your I made it ritual?
My ritual, like many other people's, is probably just a nice, good pint of beer. That's pretty much it. And it's not to say that I do it all the time, but I would say when I get off the trails, I either a cold brew at a pub or, there's some water. Or I usually don't eat a whole lot after a hike, but I would say it's a pint of beer. If somebody offers me a pint of beer after a hike, that's going to put a smile on my face.
And Arizona is definitely having a boom in breweries. Is there any special brewery that you kind of enjoy at the end of the hike?
Most definitely. I really like, oh my goodness, I don't remember their names. There's a brewery out in Flagstaff. I forget the name of it. It's fantastic beer. There's Oak Creek Brewery out here in Sedona. And then I'm currently exploring a few beers in the Phoenix, Scottsdale area. But I'm really impressed. The one thing as a Texan, I still enjoy Shiner by far, but little by little, I'm finding that the Arizona beer is really, really, really good.
Now, you mentioned you're in Sedona, and one of the things I really loved about your content is it's a mixture of talking about the cool dry frame, but then you also give trail guides on some of the sights and sounds there in Sedona, and some of the more, I guess, not as popular hikes in Sedona, because Sedona has definitely grown in popularity over the last decade, but you've really shown some places where I haven't even heard of. How do you kind of do your research in discovering those places in a popular place like Sedona?
Great question. Usually I just follow what my mother-in-law wants to do because she's based out here and she's pretty much done every trail possible. So she knows where to go, which pretty much means where there's not going to be a lot of tourists. For example, if you go to Cathedral Rock, it's beautiful, and within an hour, probably a 45-minute hike, you can get some great views. However, it's just all the tour buses go there. So thankfully, I have somebody to kind of guide me around, and I try and kind of give insights of what I'm doing, because what I've learned is a lot of hikers out there have just kind of accepted that, a backpack is going to be, regardless of how much you spend on a backpack, it's going to be hot on your back and it's going to be sweaty. So what I try and do is I try and find hikes that are, or trails that are a mix of, whether it's going up a whole lot. I don't like going up that much just because, I know myself. But, I like going on flats because I found that a lot of people just like, just a few 100 feet at elevation. Maybe sometimes like to do 1,000. And then I try and do hot weather. I try and do cool weather. And thankfully, I'm in, parts of Arizona where it can be cold. So I can test out my frame in multiple locations and say, not to just do a promo of my cool dry frame all the time, but to show people, hey, this is my hike. If you're ever in this area, this is what you're going to experience, and this is what you can expect, and maybe you'd like to come here. And, as well, FYI, if you don't like to sweat, check this out.
No, really, really great tour tutorials that you do, and then also giving a great explanation about the cool dry frame, which kind of brings me to my next question is, out of your hiking pack list, what would you say is your MVP of hiking gear?
It's going to sound really basic, but I've found the importance of bringing water. So I don't know, I can't reference who, but sometimes, they take pictures of what's in their pack, and maybe, and usually I don't see water, and maybe they're just doing it because that's the gear, which you can get a lot of cool gear, and over the years it just seems like the gear keeps changing and evolving and getting better. That's what I'm trying to do with my cool dry frame. But I found that water is so essential, and I've kind of elevated water. Maybe I'm part French, and that's why my name is pronounced Brice, because that's the French pronunciation. But I found having bringing Pellegrino or Perrier, it really elevates the experience. So I would say I really enjoy a nice bottle or can of carbonated water.
Okay. Interesting. I'll have to consider trying that out, because normally it's just flat water, but sometimes you need the bubbles.
Exactly. Nothing wrong with bubbles.
One of the things I really wanted to talk to you about, because I ended up purchasing one of your cool dry frames about 2 weeks ago. I was telling you that about 3 weeks ago, I was up in the mountains. It was 80 degrees. It was beautiful. It still felt like summer. And then within a few short days, we had fall weather, and then we just went right into winter weather in the mountains. So I haven't really had a chance to use it out on the hikes up in the mountains, but could you kind of give the audience an origin story of the cool dry frame?
Absolutely. So Vaucluse, the name Vaucluse comes from a region in southern France, which I'm not going to say that I grew up there, but I spent a lot of time because I have family out there. And Vaucluse, most people know Vaucluse, or if they ever travel to France for for holidays, they go there because it's very famous for the lavender fields and the wine. So it's where you have the Rhone Valley and the Rhone River. There's a section next to it called the Vaucluse. And statistically, I think there's almost 300 days of sunshine each year. So it's a warm climate for most of the time, but it does get cold in the winter. And so that's why wine is so great out there, because the grapes need a lot of sun. So the name comes from there, because when I would go out, I would sweat, because it's, for the most part, it's hot. So that's the origin story of the name. And then the origin story of the backpack is that I thought there would have to be an unconventional solution to back sweat, because everywhere you go, they always say your backpack should be firmly on you for the center of gravity, and it's the most it's the safest way to wear the backpack. And so I thought, well, there's got to be a little bit of a give and take. So I thought, well, what if we could keep the backpack as close as possible, but at the same time keep it separate from the back? And you'll notice that a lot of backpacks have curved frames, which they're trying to do the same thing, but the curvedness is that when the heat evaporates, it goes up. And so with the curved version of the frame, the curved part just stays on the shoulders, and so all of that heat doesn't really go out, and you're pretty much left with maybe a small portion of your back that's kind of exposed. And so I tried to design a completely, I don't know, I forget the technical term right now, but your entire back is completely off the backpack. It's almost like your backpack is elevated. It's just elevated off your back.
And the spacers that are included, how big of a gap does it provide between the frame?
Great question. So it's just under an inch, and so I think it's 0.75 inches to be exact. And I found that that's a good amount for backpackers. And then eventually we're going to release, I guess, modular spacers. We do have them, but I think the more feedback that I get from my customers, and this is a shout out to the backpacker community. They're so welcoming and they're so great with feedback. And from all my customers, I've been getting such great feedback about what they like and what they don't like, because this is a new concept. And so I'm just happy that there are people out there that are willing to try something new, because obviously having your backpack off your back sounds completely against all we've ever been taught. But I'm just thankful that there are people out there saying, yeah, this sounds like something that'll work. And so, we're relatively new, and it's thanks to them with their feedback of saying, we like this size of spacer. Can you do it, increase it here or decrease it there? So eventually we're going to have a whole lot of different variety. But for the most part, it's 0.75 inches. And for the majority of people, that right there does the job.
And if people follow you on social media, they can see that the frame really does mold not just to the backpack, but to your back. So there's not like specific gaps between your back and the frame and the backpack. It really kind of just almost attaches itself to the backpack and attaches it and kind of forms around your back. So there's no major gaps between you and the frame.
Exactly. The frame is designed, it's flexible, so it'll move as you move. And what I found is that, it's made out of TPU, which is a plastic. And when I say the word plastic, people freak out like, oh my gosh, plastic and the outdoors. Well, statistically, a lot of outdoor gear to make it weatherproof and, sustained from heat. A lot of products or a lot of gear has TPU in it. So it's flexible, it's soft, it's durable. And what I found is that the more you wear it, the more that the frame itself becomes more soft, and it's like a pair of shoes. It's like when you put a pair of shoes on, it's like, you have to break it in. So the frame is right now, that's how it's designed, is you break it in. So I always tell people, don't go out on a big hike at first, but test it out 2 or 3 times and flex it in your hands. And eventually the thing just, it pretty much, it'll kind of conform the shape. When you get it, it's flat, but you can flex it, and probably after 3 or 4 hikes, definitely 3 hikes, you can start seeing that it's taking the shape of your back.
So it almost kind of ends up molding to your specific proportions.
Exactly. That's exactly it.
And now, does it work with most backpacks under a certain liter size?
Another great question. Right now, it's a one size fits all. One of the big questions I have is like, well, will it sustain, 50, 40 pounds? It's the thing. I've sat on it. I've stepped on it. I've put huge amounts of weights on it. The thing is not going to break. So right now, it's a one size fits all. As people, as customers give me feedback, mean, eventually what I want to do is I want to make bigger frames, wider frames, and have it, the backpacking community really likes bespoke gear. It's like, well, I'm this size or I'm this shape. Can you get me something like that? So eventually we're going to have bespoke frames. I don't know when that will be, but the more success that we have, obviously, the more different types of frames we will be able to build. And obviously, one of the things we're going to introduce is actually a backpack with a frame actually attached on it. So that way, your shoulders, every part of your body, even maybe the straps, everything is slightly elevated off of you. So that way, when you're hiking and your core temperature starts increasing and you're sweating because it's your body's way of cooling down, every part of that backpack is elevated off of you. So your body can do what it naturally wants to do, is it's trying to get rid of the heat. And so hopefully, I don't know when, but in the end, that's our vision as a company, is to make things that really help people keep their core temperature more moderated and to allow that sweat to just evaporate easily, so people can hike for a longer time and they just enjoy the outdoors and they don't have to worry about, man, I'm getting a little hot, I got to take my backpack off, or I've gone as far as I should, maybe I need to turn around. All of that stuff. We really want to attack the whole concept of sweat. So you could say we're fully focused on the sweat problem.
And that's some exciting news about some possible upcoming products people should check out. Winter's now here in the Pacific Northwest, and one of the questions I had for you was, can I still use the cool dry frame in winter conditions? Because definitely in the winter I'm more layered with winter gear. Some of it is waterproof, which helps insulate your body temperature, but can also make you sweat. Have you had any feedback about folks using it in the winter time?
Great question. One of my first customers was search and rescue people out in the Appalachian Mountains. And I've learned quickly that just because the sun isn't out and it's 80, 90 degrees, the body still sweats. And so when you have those 2, 3, 4, 5 layers on you and you have a backpack, your core temperature is rising, and you've got to somehow let that heat dissipate. And so search and rescue people have been very interested in my product because it allows the heat from their back to dissipate, and so again their core temperature is more moderated, and so that way they can be outdoors a whole lot more in search of people. And so again, the challenge really isn't just sweat is just a byproduct of heat, and so if you can keep your core temperature at a cooler level, you're not going to be hot, and then eventually you're not going to sweat. Everything leads to one other thing. So if you're outdoors in the cold and you've got multiple layers and a backpack, and you're out for an hour or 2 hours, your core temperature is going to be rising, and if it's rising, you're going to sweat. And so the cool dry frame is definitely going to help, and that's what the search and rescue people have been giving me great feedback, is saying, what, this is really, really helpful, because now they don't really have to just focus so much on their own core temperature, because if they're out looking for somebody and their core temperature starts fluctuating because they're stopping and going, and they're seeing, we're hot one moment, we're cool another moment, because the sweat, when you're stopped, and your core temperature is cooling down, that sweat just becomes cold water on you, and then they've got to turn around. So far so good. I'm learning that all seasons the cool dry frame can definitely assist you.
Great to hear. I'll definitely be giving you feedback on this winter's use of it. So outside of hiking, I snowboard. Normally when I snowboard, I like to carry a backpack, but same thing when you're snowboarding, getting on and off the lift and strapping in and off, you work up a sweat, and I'll definitely be interested in seeing how it handles the cold temperatures, but also the rough and tumble of snowboarding, because I'm not a professional, I still fall, so it'll definitely be a good test just outside of hiking, is seeing how it handles the snowboarding conditions as well.
Yes, please keep us posted. And I always tell customers, if when you give us what I call a sweat check, whether it's positive or negative, I always tell them you'll get a free t-shirt. Some people like swag, some people don't. You get some coupon codes, but also you become part of my my tester community. And so there's a whole lot of other benefits with people giving feedback. So I definitely like to, my customers, they quote unquote pay it forward by taking a chance on our product, but I always like to return the favor and say, look, you've taken a chance on us, you've given us feedback, here's some other goodies. And then also when we do come out with new gear or updates on the frame, you're the first person to know. And at the moment right now, I don't know if we're going to do it in the future, but we probably will, is I'm going to give gear usually at cost or free, and you just have to pay shipping and handling, or maybe the shipping is free. But usually what I've learned is that the success of this frame and of the company is all based on my customers. So when people give me feedback and they say they like it or they want improvements, that in itself is completely invaluable. So Ivan, I look forward to your feedback, and I look forward to paying it forward with you.
Definitely excited to test it out and check it out. So for someone who recently got back into hiking, what kind of advice would you give any first-time hikers or folks that are just getting started in order for them to have a safe and rewarding experience on the trails?
I would probably not hike for more than an hour. I would probably, try and, maybe find a group. I would also, what I would do is I would use Meetup when I first went hiking. So just to find somebody, you're pretty much connecting with a guide. And so he knows where you are or where you're going, and he's always checking up on you. So try not to hike alone. Try not to hike for more than an hour. And definitely, obviously, get a nice comfortable pair of shoes, and bring water, and, bring your phone and all that other stuff. But step one is, don't try and hike alone, because, you never know what's going to happen out there.
And if you do, make sure that people are aware of where you're at, and give them a timeline of when they can expect you back. Because, we do hear about situations where folks just didn't know where their friends were at. And I've been guilty of it too, where, randomly I'll be like, oh, I'm going to go on this easy hike, but you just never know what happens. So making sure that, you are hiking with partners when you can, but when you don't, to make sure people are aware of where you're at and when can they expect you to come back. Now we're almost done with the year, but I know that in Arizona, that's the start of the fall and winter hiking season. Do you have any goals for the remainder of 2022? And then do you have any upcoming goals for the new year?
My goal is always to go out at least once a week, because the trails change, especially this time of the year. It's like a week ago I was on a hike in pretty much t-shirt and shorts, but now that's definitely not the case. So I try and hike once a week. And for goals of 2023, I would ideally, I would love to go to Washington. It just looks absolutely beautiful. I love to go to like Northern California. That looks beautiful as well. I've only been at this for about a year, and I'm just learning. I'm quote unquote falling in love with all the national parks, or all the parks, and it's just a real joy to, I'm quite active on Instagram, and it's just really amazing to see some of the pictures that people post. So sometimes I think they're just not even real. I'm like, guys, you doctored this. I mean, this looks like it's out of a video game. So I'm really looking forward to at least going to Washington, possibly going to Northern California. I passed through Utah and I didn't do anything. I felt pretty bad because I didn't recognize how beautiful Utah is. So kind of just learn a little bit more about this part of the western part of the country, and then eventually maybe 2024, go to the Northeast. It just looks beautiful. The Appalachian Trail, it just looks unbelievable. So there's a lot. My bucket list, that's one of my key things when I tell people I see a beautiful picture. I said I just put that on my bucket list. So my bucket list of hikes and trails and parks is increasing significantly, and I hope to take a few off next year.
It's great to hear. I'm excited to see them on social media when you do check them off the list. Well, thank you, Brice, for doing this podcast and joining us. The second half of the podcast, or the last little bit of the podcast, is a game of this or that questions. Ready?
Shoot.
Ascending or descending?
Ascending.
Waterfalls or summits?
Summits.
Switchbacks or straight up?
Switchbacks.
Trek poles or freehand?
Freehand.
Do you fuel up before a hike or do you fill up after?
After.
Do you bushwhack or go around?
Bushwhack until I know I have to go around.
Jump in or stay dry?
Jump in. Especially the colder the better.
Sunsets or sunrises?
Sunrises all the way.
Spring flowers or fall colors?
Fall colors. That's a tough one though.
And do you tag a hike or do you not tag a hike?
Tag. No problem there.
That was it, Brice. Thank you so much. This last little bit of the podcast, I just want to give you an opportunity for you to let folks where they can follow you on social media. They do want to check out the cool dry frame, where to see it on online and where they potentially order it. But yeah, this is your time to shine.
I'm really thankful that you gave me this opportunity to share my story and my company. But it's because I think what you do is really, really cool. And all the best to you. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you, Brice. And you were one of the first folks to reach out to me when I first launched Hikes and Mics, and you really kind of set the tone of how this community is online. And you were just like wanting to connect with people and just promote one another and their hiking experiences, and that was really great. And I've been following you ever since, and I really enjoy seeing all the different places that you visit in Arizona, because even when I was there, South Mountain was only 5-minute drive away, so that's where I would end up hiking. And I've heard of the Sonora Preserve up by Scottsdale, but never had an opportunity to check it out. And next time I go back down to Phoenix, it'll definitely be on my list. But yeah, for folks interested in following you online, where could they follow you?
Best things to do is my website, pretty much my website and Instagram. I even have a YouTube channel because I do full 5-minute reviews. So
yeah, and we'll add it to the show notes. Well, thank you again, Brice, for joining me. It was really great talking to you. I'm excited to continue seeing your reintroduction into hiking and seeing all the places that you'll be visiting this year and next.
Thank you, Ivan. Thank you so much. Take care. God bless.
Thank you, Brice, for joining us on the latest episode of the Hikes and Mics podcast. Make sure to follow him on Instagram at Vaucluse Gear to check out the cool dry frame, or visit his website at www.vauclusegear.com. Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of the Hikes and Mics podcast. We'll be putting out new episodes every week through the fall and winter. Be sure to like and subscribe to not miss out on those. Also, be sure to follow us on Instagram at Hikes and Mics. Catch you on the next one. This episode's music was created by Ketsa. Follow him on Instagram at Ketsa Music. This episode is brought to you by Flip Socks. Whether you're on the trail, on the job, or in the yard, Flip Socks will keep Mother Nature out of your boots with their innovative nylon sleeve. You no longer need to worry about any annoying debris getting trapped in your boots during your hikes. Simply flip down the nylon sleeve over any boot to prevent Mother Nature from finding its way inside, keeping your feet comfortable all day long. To get your first pair, visit flipsockswithaz.com and enter promo code HikesMics10 at checkout to receive 10% off your order. And for listeners who use the promo code at checkout, I'll be donating 100% of the Season 2 promo code proceeds to Big City Mountaineers, who provide transformative experiences through connections to nature that strengthen life skills and build community for youth and disinvested communities across the nation. So if you're tired of bits and pieces of the trail finding its way into your hiking boots, pick up a pair of Flip Socks today with the promo code HikesMics10 to get 10% off. For website and promo code, see the episode description.